The chronicles of empires often begin with songs of glory, but mine begins with silence, the silence of fleets that never returned. I was there, among the council that ordered the campaign, when the word *human* was still spoken with disdain, a trivial species of fragile bipeds clinging to a single world. We had crushed civilizations that spanned dozens of systems. How could these latecomers present a challenge? Even now, I remember the chamber, the long arcs of metal and light, the banners of conquered peoples draped like trophies, and the arrogance that hung heavier than the air itself. Our empire had thrived on expansion for 1,000 years. World after world had been pacified, their resistance collapsing against our unmatched fleets. We, the Zerati, had perfected war into a science, reducing conflict to equations of logistics, attrition, and inevitable victory. I, Archivist Loroven, was tasked with preserving these triumphs for eternity, binding fact to memory. Yet I also bore witness to our mistakes, and none was greater than the choice to challenge humanity. The provocation had seemed minor. A scouting detachment, tasked with surveying a resource-rich sector near the edge of human-claimed territory, was obliterated. Our commanders assumed a pirate ambush, or perhaps a desperate act by colonists who did not understand the futility of defying us. But when Moss ships vanished, their wreckage later found drifting near the orbit of Terra's colonies, unease began to whisper among the Admiralty. Reports followed. Human vessels deploying unconventional weapons, raiding supply lines, even infiltrating communication relays to broadcast mocking transmissions into our secure channels. Their words were crude, yet their audacity unsettled even seasoned officers. "You do not frighten us," they said. "Come, and you will see." The High Conclave assembled soon after, their debate etched into my memory with the sharpness of a blade. Chancellor Drelf dismissed humanity as a tribe of animals dressed in stolen metal. Others, more cautious, warned that their adaptability was unlike anything we had seen. They had advanced from primitive combustion engines to interstellar travel in scarcely 2 centuries, a blink of time compared to the millennia it had taken most species. That speed, some argued, was unnatural, perhaps dangerous. Yet arrogance is a poison that clouds judgment. The conclave voted to respond with overwhelming force. If humans wished for defiance, they would be shown futility. A fleet of 30 war carriers, crewed by our most decorated warriors, was assembled. They were the vanguard spear, elite among the elite, and their record was flawless. Songs were sung for them before departure, cities erupting in celebration as they marched to their vessels. None doubted their success. None imagined their return would be silence. Among the fleet was Commander Varric, a figure both feared and admired within the Empire. He had never tasted defeat, carving victories across nebula and void, his name whispered with reverence. When he addressed the conclave before departure, his words were sharp with confidence. "Humans are bold because they have not yet felt the weight of inevitability. We shall correct their misunderstanding." His warriors echoed him with a rhythm of war chants that rattled the chamber walls. I recorded it all, penning phrases that now taste of ashes. When the fleet departed, a shadow lingered in my thoughts. I had studied fragments of intercepted human transmissions, fragments of literature, history, and culture. Unlike other species, they spoke endlessly of conflict, not as tragedy alone, but as crucible. Their stories glorified resistance, their art obsessed with survival against overwhelming odds. Where we celebrated harmony enforced by conquest, they celebrated struggle itself. It was not logical, not efficient, yet it carved them into something unpredictable. I tried to voice this in the chamber, but my words were drowned beneath laughter. "Archivist," one counselor sneered, "your task is to write history, not to shape it." So history unfolded without me, and I became its unwilling witness. As the vanguard spear entered human claimed space, the first reports arrived, fragmented, strained with static, but enough to chill even the proudest. Human defenses were more formidable than predicted. They did not line their fleets for direct confrontation, but scattered like shards of glass, each cutting when least expected. Supply convoys vanished. Outposts went dark. Even as our ships advanced, they were bled by strikes that seemed orchestrated less by strategy than by instinct. Still, the conclave dismissed these concerns. "It is resistance before collapse," Chancellor Drelf declared. Nothing more. But I felt unease grow, whispering at the edges of my thoughts. Humanity was not resisting like prey, they were fighting like predators cornered, their eyes fixed not on survival alone, but on inflicting as much damage as possible. And then the reports ceased. One by one, the fleet's signals went silent, until only void remained. Weeks passed with no return. The vanguard spear, our empire's pride, had been devoured by the dark, leaving not even a whisper of survivors. The silence was worse than defeat. It was an absence, an unanswerable question. I remember the conclave chamber on the day the last transmission faded. No war songs were sung. No cheers filled the air. Even the banners seemed to sag in the stillness. For the first time in centuries, the Empire tasted something it had forgotten: uncertainty. And as archivist, I felt a truth gnawing inside me, unspoken but inescapable. We had sent our best to defeat humans, and none had returned. The story had only begun. When the Second Fleet arrived in human-claimed space, I was not among them, but I carried every word of their transmissions, as though they were etched into my own bones. This time, the Conclave had chosen Admiral Syraxis to command, a strategist renowned for his precision and unflinching resolve. He was the kind of leader who turned battles into equations, stripping away chaos until only victory remained. Many believed he would succeed where Commander Varric had failed, and Syraxis himself spoke with measured certainty. Humans are reckless. Recklessness can be calculated, contained, and destroyed. His logic was crisp, but I could not shake the shadow that hung over every syllable. The first clash came at the edge of the Eridan system, where human colonies circled a modest yellow star. Syraxis expected a conventional stand, defenders aligned in desperate formation. Instead, his scouts found fragments, small patrols darting through asteroid belts, gunships hiding in planetary shadows, freighters weaponized into battering rams. It was not a fleet in the sense we understood. It was a swarm, scattered and unpredictable, striking from angles that no strategist would have mapped. I listened to the battle through distorted relays, hearing Syraxis bark orders with cold efficiency. At first, our ships cut through the resistance, annihilating half a dozen human craft in minutes. Yet the victory was never clean. Every destroyed vessel seemed to draw others from the void, faster than reports could track. Human fighters darted between capital ships, too small to matter by themselves, yet coordinated with uncanny instinct. They used terrain as a weapon, hiding in the flare of Eridan's sun, bursting from magnetic storms to fire at point-blank range before vanishing again. Syraxis adapted quickly, or so it seemed. He ordered tighter formations, sweeping strikes designed to herd the humans into kill zones. For a brief moment, it worked. Several colonies fell silent, their defenses crushed beneath our firepower. I recorded Syraxis's message to the Conclave: resistance is crumbling. They fight with fury, but fury is no substitute for strategy. His words were steady, almost bored. Yet in the background of his transmission, I heard something else, the sound of human voices breaking into his secured channels. They laughed. It was not the laugh of triumph, nor of mockery, but something far stranger, a raw, unfiltered joy at the chaos of battle itself. The humans taunted Syraxis's crew, speaking in their guttural tongue. Translations rendered them as jeers. Still hey. Is this all you've got? But the tone was what unsettled me. No species laughed in the face of annihilation. Not the Karate, who had begged for mercy before their homeworld burned. Not the Drulak, who had fallen silent as their fleets vanished. Only humans laughed as they bled, as though war itself was a game. Reports followed that confirmed what the laughter suggested. They learned. Every maneuver Syraxis employed was effective once, perhaps twice, but never a third time. Humans adapted at a speed that defied reason. They studied weapon cycles, memorized firing arcs, and devised countermeasures with terrifying efficiency. Entire battle groups were lost because humans discovered within hours how to overload shield harmonics, a flaw no other species had uncovered in centuries of warfare. Syraxis adjusted again and again, but each adjustment became another lesson for his enemy. The Conclave grew restless as news trickled in. Why has he not ended them? Chancellor Drelf demanded. He commands twice the firepower of the Vanguard Spey. But the Conclave did not hear the full transmissions, the ones I collected and preserved. They did not hear the weariness in Syraxus's voice as he admitted, in private, that he could not predict the humans. They are not following logic, he said. They are improvising, reshaping their tactics as though the void itself whispers strategies to them. Every encounter is a new war. On the third cycle of battle, Syraxus attempted to draw the humans into decisive engagement near the gas giant Carlos. His fleet arrayed in perfect formation, a net that no adversary should have pierced. The humans came anyway, not as a fleet but as fragments. Small corvettes hurled themselves directly into carrier hulls, detonating reactors in suicidal defiance. Others feigned retreat, only to return at angles the fleet's sensors had dismissed as impossible. The engagement degenerated into chaos, our war carriers struggling to defend against enemies that seemed to multiply from the shadows. I remember the last clean transmission from Syraxus. They are not fighting for survival. They are fighting for the joy of resistance. And I fear we have mistaken their weakness for something far more dangerous. Then came static, followed by silence, broken only by human signals echoing across the void. This time the laughter was clearer. They sang while we died. For weeks afterward, fragments of Syraxus's fleet limped back across the border, broken vessels carrying haunted crews. They spoke of battles where human pilots seemed unkillable, darting through fire like spirits, where soldiers on the ground fought with improvised weapons that felled armored troops. Survivors whispered that humanity was not merely defending their homes. They were testing us, shaping themselves against our strengths, preparing for greater wars still to come. The conclave, of course, refused to believe. They spoke of bad luck, of commanders failing their duty. A third fleet will suffice, Drelth announced, though his voice cracked beneath the weight of unspoken fear. But I had listened. I had heard laughter in the dark, and I knew it for what it was, not madness, but confidence. Humanity was not merely surviving our onslaught, they were thriving in it, sharpening themselves against our empire like a blade against stone. As archivist, I was bound to record truth, no matter how bitter. And the truth was this: the war we thought already won had only just begun, and in every defeat, humanity grew stronger. The Third Fleet was not assembled in triumph, nor in confidence, but in desperation disguised as resolve. The conclave could no longer dismiss humanity as an annoyance, yet their pride forbade them from speaking of fear. They named this new armada the Hammer of Dawn, as though words could mask the cracks spreading through the Empire's facade. I was summoned to record its departure, though the chamber lacked the raucous chants that once accompanied such moments. The banners still hung, but their colors seemed faded. Eyes that once burned with certainty now flickered with unease. At its head stood High Marshal Kael'th, the Empire's supreme commander of ground campaigns, revered as the most formidable soldier our people had produced in centuries. He was no theoretician like Syraxus, no calculating tactician hidden behind equations. Kael'th was forged in blood and fire, his victories carved into the bones of those who defied us. His presence was meant to reassure the populace. If humanity could be defeated, Kael'th would be the one to do it. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried the weight of inevitability. We will burn their nests. We will silence their laughter. The Hammer of Dawn crossed the border with brutal efficiency, razing outlying colonies and annihilating scattered human vessels. At first, it seemed Kael'th might succeed where others had failed. Yet within days, the pattern emerged again. Humans refused direct confrontation. They struck supply lines, crippled fuel depots, and cut communications in ways that forced Kael'th to divide his forces. The larger the hammer, the easier they slipped between its blows. It was on the soil of Viridian Prime that Kael'th met his true challenge. The planet was scarcely more than a frontier settlement, with defenses primitive by our standards. Yet when Kael'th's shock troops descended, they found not civilians cowering in fear, but farmers and miners wielding rifles, explosives, even sharpened tools, all united in defiance. The first wave was met with ferocity that should have been impossible. Trenches lined the fields, traps hidden in the forests, barricades choking every street. Our soldiers, clad in armor that had conquered empires, found themselves fighting not against soldiers, but against a people who refused to surrender even as their homes burned. Kael'th himself led the second assault, his massive frame striding through fire as he rallied his warriors. He cut down dozens of human defenders with his plasma blade, yet the resistance did not falter. They fought as though each death was fuel for those who remained, their determination swelling where logic said it should collapse. Reports spoke of children carrying ammunition, elders dragging the wounded to safety, and soldiers who fought on even after mortal wounds, clinging to life long enough to take their enemies with them. In one transmission, an officer gasped words that chilled me. They do not fear us. They fear failing each other. No greater weapon could exist. For 3 cycles the battle raged, Viridian skies aflame with fire and smoke. The humans should have crumbled within hours. Instead, they grew more dangerous. They scavenged our fallen weapons, turned wreckage into shields, and used our own technology against us with uncanny speed. Every tactic Kael'th devised unraveled in their hands. When he deployed aerial bombardments, they burrowed into caverns and struck from underground. When he unleashed armored walkers, they lured them into ravines and detonated charges that sent the machines toppling into ruin. The cost was staggering. Entire divisions were lost to people who had never known war until the moment it was forced upon them. Kael'th did not retreat. His pride forbade it, but even he began to admit in private transmissions that this conflict was unlike any other. "They are not soldiers," he said, his voice low with something I had never heard from him before: respect. "They are survival given form. They wield desperation as a blade sharper than any forged in our foundries." When Viridian finally fell, it was a Pyrrhic victory. The colony lay in ashes, its defenders annihilated, but Kael'th's forces were so shattered that the Hammer of Dawn could no longer press forward. Worse, as word of the battle spread, reports emerged that humans had struck elsewhere during the siege, crippling outposts and destroying shipyards thought untouchable. The battle for one insignificant planet had been a distraction, and the humans had used it to turn the war in their favor. The Conclave demanded Kael'th continue the offensive, but the High Marshal remained silent for days, locked within his command vessel. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of prophecy. "We sought to measure them by the standards of other species. That was our first mistake. They do not fight for empire, nor for conquest, nor even for survival alone. They fight because resistance is etched into their very nature. Every strike we deliver only sharpens their edge. We are not fighting prey. We are feeding predators." I recorded those words with a hand that trembled. For the first time in our history, a commander of Kael'th's stature admitted that victory might be impossible. The Conclave dismissed his warnings, of course, calling them exhaustion, exaggeration, weakness. But I had seen the look in his eyes when he returned from Viridian, not defeat, but revelation. The silence that followed his final transmission was louder than any triumph. Weeks passed, and fragments of the Hammer of Dawn limped home, fewer than a tenth of those who had departed. Kael'th himself did not return. His flagship was last reported plunging into the atmosphere of a human world, surrounded on all sides by swarms of enemy vessels. Some claimed he fell in battle, roaring defiance to the end. Others whispered he chose death rather than face the truth he had spoken aloud. What remained was fear. Not among the Conclave, who still wrapped themselves in denial, but among the people. Stories spread of humans who fought like storms, who turned despair into victory, who laughed as death closed in. Mothers hushed their children with tales not of monsters in the dark, but of humans who might one day come for them. I, Archivist Loraven, wrote every word into the record. And as I did, I understood that our empire's greatest error was not underestimating human strength, but misunderstanding their essence. They did not merely endure adversity, they became it, shaping themselves into the weapon no enemy could anticipate. And though the Conclave prepared yet another fleet, I knew the truth in my marrow. We were no longer hunters. We had stumbled into the lair of a predator that had only just begun to bare its teeth. The Fourth Fleet was not forged from arrogance or even pride, but from the last desperate fragments of an empire refusing to admit collapse. The Conclave named it the Eternal Flame, a title chosen to suggest immortality, though I suspect even they knew it would sputter into ash. Every vessel that could be spared was conscripted, every surviving veteran recalled. They threw together the remains of fractured divisions, ships stripped from distant patrols, and crews who had seen their comrades vanish into silence. It was not a fleet born of strength, but of denial. At its center was Supreme Commander Thalas, the final weapon of the Empire. Unlike Varric's arrogance or Syraxis's logic, unlike Kael'th's grim respect, Thalys embodied the cold certainty of authority itself. She had never been known to question the conclave, and for this reason alone, they trusted her to succeed where others had failed. "This war ends now," she declared before departure, her voice resonant across the Empire's channels. "Humanity will bow, or humanity will burn." The people cheered, though their cheers sounded hollow, a ritual masking dread. The eternal flame plunged into human space like a blade, its firepower greater than any fleet before it. Entire worlds were blockaded, colonies surrounded, escape cut off. Thalys sought not to win through precision, but through overwhelming annihilation. Her strategy was simple: leave humanity nowhere to run. For a time, it seemed effective. Several outposts were obliterated, their defenders buried beneath orbital bombardments. Yet even in destruction, the pattern repeated. Each world consumed became a lesson for the next. Each slaughter only hardened human resolve. The decisive confrontation came at Archan's Reach, a nexus of human colonies bound together by a sprawling defense network. Thalys assembled her armada into a wall of steel and plasma, intent on crushing humanity's last coordinated defense. What she found instead was something we had never imagined: unity. For the first time, humanity's scattered fleets did not arrive piecemeal or in fragments. They came together, system after system pouring their ships into the void. Old freighters welded with cannons, civilian craft retrofitted into warships, sleek fighters darting like hornets. The numbers were staggering, but it was not the numbers that stole the breath from those who watched. It was the will. Every vessel, no matter how crude, hurled itself into the fray as if the survival of their species depended on their single sacrifice. Perhaps it did. The battle raged for days. Thalys unleashed everything: concentrated bombardments, shock troops, scorched earth tactics designed to erase every trace of resistance. Yet the humans did not break. They bent, reformed, and struck again, each wave more ferocious than the last. I received fragments of transmissions, voices crackling through static. "We will hold. We will not kneel. If we fall fighting." Their words carried no despair, only defiance. Reports told of human vessels colliding deliberately with our war carriers, detonating their own cause to tear gaping holes in our lines. Squadrons fought to the last ship, not retreating even when annihilation was certain. Thalys called it madness. I called it inevitability. For every empire we had conquered, survival had been the goal. For humans, survival was secondary. What mattered was the fight itself, the refusal to yield even in the face of certain death. That was their weapon, sharper than any blade or cannon. When Thalys's ground forces descended upon Archan's primary world, she discovered the truth Kael'th had glimpsed on Viridian. There were no civilians in this war. Every settlement became a fortress, every street a battlefield. Farmers wielded rifles, children carried ammunition, engineers repurposed factories into foundries of war. Humanity itself had become the soldier. Our elite legions, feared across 100 worlds, were dragged into brutal street-by-street combat that devoured them in days. Entire divisions vanished into the labyrinth of human cities, ambushed from rooftops, tunnels, and rubble. Even when our technology prevailed, the cost was unbearable. At last, in desperation, Thalys attempted to draw all forces into a final engagement above Archan itself. She sought to end the war in one decisive strike, to annihilate humanity's fleet in the open void. But what she achieved was only her own undoing. The humans did not scatter this time. They converged. Their ragged ships formed no neat formations, no ordered lines. They swarmed, chaotic and unpredictable, overwhelming with sheer ferocity. Where our empire sought control, they embraced disorder, and in that disorder lay their strength. One by one, our war carriers fell. The eternal flame sputtered out, not with a single cataclysm, but with 1,000 small deaths, each ship extinguished by the will of a species that refused to vanish. Thalys's flagship fought until its hull split open and fire consumed it, her last transmission a defiant roar. This empire does not fall. But the words rang hollow, swallowed by silence as a vessel plunged into the void. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained of the eternal flame. Humanity's fleets, battered but unbroken, drifted among the wreckage, their beacons pulsing across the stars like the heartbeat of a predator that had only just begun to hunt. Of the Empire's greatest armada, no vessel returned. And so I write the final words of this chronicle, though my hands tremble as I do. We believed ourselves eternal, the masters of war, the arbiters of survival. Yet we mistook arrogance for strength, and in doing so we awakened something far greater. Humanity did not merely survive us. They consumed us, reshaping themselves with every blow, turning defeat into fuel for victory. We sent our best to defeat them, and none returned. Now I pray they never turn their gaze outward, beyond their own worlds, for if they do, the stars themselves may tremble beneath their laughter. The war should have ended with the silence of our fleets, but instead it birthed something far worse, uncertainty. For centuries, our empire had been the constant, the unmoving center of the galaxy's order. Now, that center had fractured. No conclave to decree victory, no legions to enforce dominion, no fleets to guard the borders. Only ruins, whispers, and the gnawing dread that humanity had not finished with us. I, Archivist Loraven, survived because I was no one worth striking. Historians are not targets, not until their words carry more weight than armies. I drifted through abandoned stations and hollow cities, recording fragments of testimony from the few who returned alive. They spoke not of strategy or defeat, but of faces, human faces, burned into memory. A pilot who smiled as his ship rammed a carrier. A woman standing atop rubble, rifle smoking in her hands. A child who glared at armored soldiers as though daring them to try. These images spread like contagion, and soon the Empire's subjects spoke the word *human* with reverence or terror, depending on which emotion consumed them first. And yet, for all our fear, humanity did not come. Their fleets did not cross our borders, their armies did not march on our worlds. Instead, silence hung where conquest should have thundered. This was, perhaps, the most unnerving detail of all. We had expected retaliation, subjugation, even extermination. But the humans remained within their systems, licking their wounds, their laughter echoing only faintly in intercepted transmissions. Some argued this proved they were merciful. Others, myself included, feared a different truth. They were patient. It was during these uncertain years that I met one who embodied that faith. Kael'th had fallen on Viridian, or so I believed, but fragments of his legion limped back across the border, and among them was his adjutant, a soldier named Velrin. He bore scars across his scaled face, his armor shattered and rebuilt from scavenged pieces. His eyes no longer carried the fire of conquest, only the weight of memory. When I asked him what he had seen, his voice shook though his hands did not. They did not fight us for territory, he said. They fought us for the right to remain themselves. Do you understand, Archivist? We could strip a planet to ash, and they would rise from its ruins. We could shatter fleets, and they would build new ones from the wreckage. Humanity does not resist because they hope to win. They resist because resistance itself is their nature. Velrin's words haunted me. If they were true, then humanity was not simply another empire waiting to expand. They were something new, something more dangerous, a species that thrived in struggle, that grew stronger the more they were tested. To fight them was to sharpen them, and to flee them was to grant them time. Either way, they became more formidable. The central conflict was no longer the war between our empire and humanity. That war was over, decided in silence and flame. The true conflict now was within us, what to do with the shadow they cast. Our people whispered of abandoning the old order entirely, scattering to distant stars where humans might never find us. Others demanded a rebuilding, a reforging of the empire into something harder, sharper, capable of standing against predators. And through it all, a question lingered. What if humanity decided they were not content to remain within their borders? It was then that rumors began to spread, rumors too persistent to ignore. Human scouts sighted beyond their claimed space. Not fleets, not invasions, but quiet vessels, observers, perhaps, or hunters. They never lingered long enough to engage, yet their presence was undeniable. They were watching, learning, measuring. And every time a sighting was confirmed, a chill ran through me, for I recalled Kael'th's final words, we are not fighting prey. We are feeding predators. The conclave no longer existed, but smaller councils rose in its place, fractured fragments of authority clinging to what scraps remained. They argued endlessly over how to respond. Some urged diplomacy, though no envoy ever returned with certainty. Others demanded war, though no fleet existed strong enough to fight. Most, however, simply prayed that humanity would be content with its own worlds, prayed that laughter would not one day roll across our skies. As for me, I no longer write for the empire. I write for those who will come after, should any of us survive what is to come. My chronicle is no longer a record of conquest, but a warning carved in words. Humanity has shown us what they are, and what they are cannot be undone. We unleash them into the galaxy's memory, and their legend grows with each retelling. I do not know when they will come, nor whether they even desire conquest. Perhaps they will remain where they are, content to forge themselves in battles of their own making. But I cannot silence the dread that hums in my veins. For what predator, once it has tasted blood, remains forever in its den? I end this section of the record with a single truth, carved from the ruin of empires. Humanity did not defeat us because they were stronger. They defeated us because they refused to stop. And if they ever turn that refusal outward, if they ever decide the stars themselves are worth the struggle, then no fleet, no empire, no species will stand against them. We sent our best to defeat humans. None returned. And now the question that terrifies me most is not how we lost, but why humanity has not yet come to finish what they began. Silence is the most dangerous omen. In the years following the collapse of our fleets, silence became humanity's weapon. No declarations of victory, no demands for surrender, no fleets pouring across our borders. They left us to stew in the wreckage of our empire, our pride bleeding into ash. But silence breeds questions, and questions breed fear. I had thought the story of their defiance complete, yet it was only the prologue to something far greater. It began with whispers of human ships beyond their claimed space. Not armadas, not invasions, but single vessels, small and unassuming. They appeared on the edges of fractured star systems, drifting near forgotten stations, slipping through the ruins of old trade routes. Some believed them scouts, others, hunters. None dared to pursue. Those who tried returned only with fragments of transmissions, human voices speaking in tones that were calm, almost casual. "We are only watching," one message said. Watching was worse than conquest. Watching meant waiting. Among those who noticed was Velrin, the scarred adjutant of Kael'th. He had survived Viridian's inferno, yet survival had hollowed him. I sought him often, for in his memories lay truths I could not ignore. One night, beneath the shadow of a half-lit station orbiting a dead world, he confessed what haunted him. "Do you know why they laugh, Archivist? It is not madness. It is release. They have made peace with death, so death cannot hold them. That is what we fought against. Not soldiers. Not strategy. Freedom." His words ignited the conflict now tearing through what remains of our people. On one side stand those who believe we must prepare, forge anew, rebuild fleets to guard against the day humanity turns outward. On the other are those who see preparation as provocation, insisting we must shrink, scatter, and hope to be forgotten. Neither side understands the truth that Velrin and I do. Humanity does not need provocation. Resistance is in their marrow. To wait is to sharpen them. To fight is to sharpen them. Every choice feeds the same end. The first proof came at Vanos, a neutral system thought beneath humanity's notice. When a minor warlord attempted to seize its resources, human ships appeared without warning. Not a fleet, not an army, only a handful of vessels. Yet they struck with surgical ferocity, annihilating the warlord's forces in hours. Then, just as quickly, they were gone. The Vanos miners spoke of soldiers who disembarked only long enough to deliver supplies, to mend broken infrastructure, to leave behind warnings. "We do not conquer," they said. "We ensure you can resist." The message was clear. Humanity had no need to rule. They were content to inspire others to become what we had once feared. For the first time in my long life, I glimpsed the shape of the future. Humanity was no empire. Empires rot from the weight of their own ambition. Humanity was a storm, carried not by territory, but by spirit. They did not seek dominion. They sought challenge, and in challenge, growth. That is why their silence unsettled us so deeply. They were not idle. They were preparing. And so the central conflict sharpened, not between our empire and theirs, for our empire no longer exists, but between what we will become in the shadow of their existence. Will we cling to pride, rebuild in their likeness, and meet them again as adversaries sharpened for slaughter? Or will we dissolve into scattered fragments, hoping our absence will let us vanish from their sight? Both paths feel like defeat, yet neither offers escape. Velrin, for all his scars, has chosen a third path. He speaks of seeking them, not as enemies, but as students. If we cannot outmatch them, perhaps we can learn from them. Perhaps we can become more than what we were. His idea spreads like fire among the young, who no longer dream of banners and conquest but of laughter in the face of annihilation. They envy humanity's freedom, their defiance, their joy in the crucible. Some whisper of abandoning our name, our history, to become something new, something more dangerous. I record this not as prophecy, but as warning. We stand at a precipice. Humanity has already reshaped us without lifting a blade. Their silence is louder than any fleet, their restraint heavier than conquest. They do not need to destroy us. We are doing that ourselves, torn between fear and envy. And as I write, I cannot silence the thought that perhaps this was always their intent, not to conquer, but to reveal, to force the galaxy to see itself, and in that mirror, to change. I end this record as I began, with silence. For the conclave is gone, the fleets are gone, the empire is gone. Only words remain, and words are fragile things. Yet perhaps fragility is what humanity turned into strength. They showed us that weakness is not the end, but the beginning. That is their terror, and their gift. We sent our best to defeat humans, and none returned. Now I wonder whether, when they finally decide to step beyond their borders, any of us will remain, not because they destroyed us, but because we were unable to survive the truths they left behind.